Tennessee World Affairs Council's International Career Panel. Today, we bring you a special episode in the series with our focus on women in international business. My name is Lucy Buck, and I'm a senior at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I am majoring in supply chain management and business analytics with a concentration in international business. I'm a member of the Haslam Scholars Program, the premier honors program at the university, and I also serve as the president of the International Business Club. The International Business Club is a student organization that strives to prepare students at the University of Tennessee to become effective and thoughtful business leaders in an increasingly globalized business environment. We achieve this purpose by hosting events such as this to expose students to global perspectives and ideas and encourage collaboration, discussion, and innovation regarding all things related to international business. For our panelists, I'd like to welcome you. This program has been organized by the World Affairs Council and the University of Tennessee Center for Global Engagement. Let me say a word about the Tennessee World Affairs Council. It is a unique grassroots educational association that works to bring global awareness programs to the community. The council invites you to become members and to check out the extensive archive of programs on global issues, including previous career panels. Those are on the youtube.com/TNWAC channel. The UTK, Center for Global Engagement, works to lead the University of Tennessee's strategies for global education, research, and engagement. Now, on to our program. We are pleased to bring you a terrific panel of women of achievement who are engaged in a variety of careers. We thank them for taking time to share their stories with us tonight. In the interest of time, I will refer you to the tnwac.org program page for their complete biographies. For those watching this in the archive, please refer to the program notes. We will also learn more about their backgrounds in our conversation. Now, allow me to introduce our panelists. Lulu Copeland is Executive Director of the Tennessee China Network, a nonprofit organization that connects people and businesses to enhance bilateral trade and investment. She is also an independent economic and workforce development consultant. Beth-Ann Martorello is Senior Vice President and Chief Audit Officer at Bernstein, or AB. AB is a global investment firm with new headquarters in Nashville. They employ over 4,000 and manage almost $700 billion in assets. Robin Reliford is Head of Health and Safety at WorldStrides, an educational travel organization that works to give students experiences beyond the classroom. Over 9 million students have traveled throughout the United States and abroad in WorldStrides programs. Masami Tyson is Global Director of Foreign Direct Investment, or FDI, at the State Department of Economic and Community Development. She practiced law for almost 2 decades prior to her current work, which is to bring global businesses to Tennessee. Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your time, insights, and perspectives. For our audience, we will begin with pre-written questions for our panel to bring you their stories. We want to know about the inspiration and preparation that led them on their career paths, what they do in their working life, how to achieve work-life balance, and the challenges women potentially face in the workplace and in international business careers. We look forward to your questions, audience. Please add them to the Q&A tab on your Zoom screen. If you put your questions in the chat box, they may not be seen. After I go through my pre-written questions for our panelists, we will go to the Q&A box and ask the audience questions from there. So moving on now to our questions. First question for this evening is for, starting with Masami. What is your day-to-day life like in your current job?
Okay, great question. So as Lucy kindly introduced, I work for the state of Tennessee, and I work for the department that creates jobs for Tennesseans. So everything I do is directed towards that. That is our end goal. But the good news is every day is different for me. And part of that, the reason is that I wear different hats in my role. So for example, one is I manage a team of foreign directors that are located in Asia and Europe. They are our state of Tennessee foreign offices, and they are the ones that try to identify companies that are interested in investing in the United States and hopefully Tennessee. So I spend a lot of time every week with each of my directors, and we talk about upcoming leads and projects and companies and relationships and meetings that they've been to. I also help them create strategy. So that might be one day. Another day, I might be participating in exciting things, such as the one I am in right now, because one of the things I love about my job is that, as I used the word already several times in the last couple minutes, my job is about building relationships and getting the word out that Tennessee is open for business, and in particular, in my role, to international business. So every opportunity like this, I am very excited about and grateful for. And also another day, I might be in meetings with international and diplomatic offices, such as embassies and consulates. And again, it's about relationship building between Tennessee and the countries.
Thank you so much, Masami. That's really exciting. Moving on to Lulu, what is your day-to-day life like? You're muted.
So I start my day pretty early. 5:30 Eastern time is usually when I start getting on the computer, answering emails, and tend to social media. I manage due to the different roles I have accumulated. Then a lot of virtual or face-to-face meetings. My earliest meetings right now is a monthly planning meeting at 7:30 for a February event I coordinate annually. And latest recently, due to the international audience, might be 9:30 p.m. In between would be working with clients, partners, collaborators, potential speakers for future events. I work with several international business councils of different chambers around Tennessee. So like Masami said, building a relationship is important. So you want to make sure that you are communicating frequently. So days are different, like hers as well. During month of October, I do a lot of manufacturing tours because manufacturing day is October 1st. But throughout the months, there are a lot of focus on promoting manufacturing with future workforce. So I have hosted 4 tours this month already. And then today I did a panel discussion during lunch about workforce of the future.
Wow, that's a long day. Also a lot of variety.
Yeah.
Thank you. Moving on to Robin, what is your day-to-day life like?
Hi, Lucy. Thank you so much for having me today. So much like you've just heard, for me, working in global risk management every day is also going to be very different, really depending on what is going on in the world that day. I always start my day with a to-do list, but I always know I have to be very flexible with that. Really, there are 4 primary functions for my office. And I may work on any one of those or some combination of those throughout the course of a day. The first is overseeing incident management. So really, no matter where any of our travelers are in the world, my office is going to work hand in hand with our global staff to provide 24/7 emergency support and be able to respond to an incident anywhere in the world if something were to occur. The second function is policy development. So this is, just to make sure that we are actually prepared to respond to any incident and have the right protocols in place. My office really tries to stay abreast of best practices within the field. And we're regularly reviewing our policies and our protocols to make sure that they're up to date and appropriate. Next, we have monitoring worldwide events to understand what is happening in any of our program destinations and how that may impact our operations. So you can imagine during COVID, like all of these things have been nonstop. And then of course, emergency communications are also a large part of what I do. So whenever there is an incident in the world, whether it impacts an individual traveler or an entire location or the entire world, we are trying to communicate with all of our stakeholders to make sure they understand not just what is happening, but how our organization is responding. So I try to start each day early, reading the news and reading any security reports or updates that came in overnight, whether through our private security provider or our on-the-ground teams. And then depending on what has come in, my day will take off from there.
Thank you so much, Robin. And Beth-Ann, what is your day-to-day life like?
Much like my co-panelists, there is no sort of typical day. For example, right now we're in the middle of planning. So after this lovely event, I have 2 meetings, one for our folks in Taiwan and one for our folks in Hong Kong. So much like Lulu, you can start very early in the day and go very long. We're a global internal audit function. So we have staff in Taiwan, Hong Kong, London, and Luxembourg, Nashville, and New York. So we kind of run the gamut there. And the audits can be anything from operational, looking at trading or looking at research, or any one investment operation, client reporting. I mean, they just run the gamut. And plus we do the SOX 404 testing for our 10K. So there is no typical day. There is no normal day. I think adaptability and being able to change on a dime is really critical if in any job function, regardless if it's global or just internal.
Yeah, it really sounds like endurance also isn't
Endurance, a lot of caffeine, good coffee. If you're a coffee drinker, good tea if you're a tea drinker.
Get that caffeine. Yeah. Thank you so much, Beth-Ann. So on to our second question. A lot of our audience members tonight are college students. So starting with Lulu, I'm curious, what was your major or area of study when you were in college, and how did your college experience impact your career?
Well, I started out with architecture and then engineering, and actually finished up with engineering management. And all the subject matters and courses enable me to respond and support projects in previous years and currently. And of course, some of the past study may require refresher now and then, but I believe my career definitely will continue to be shaped by my past experience and lessons learned. So try to accumulate those knowledge and know where to find your subject matter experts when you need them.
That's great advice. Thank you. Now, Masami, what was your major in college?
So the major was called the writing seminars at the particular university I went to, but it was creative writing. So I actually did that for my undergraduate degree, and I even got a master's degree in it. And I taught creative writing for a while. And then I went on to get a law degree, as you said, for my introduction. So I did that for a while, and then now I'm doing something entirely different. But I think, as Lulu alluded to, I don't think any of it was a waste. In fact, it's all been a plus for the work I do. At the very least, it kind of makes you a more diverse and interesting person, I suppose, I hope. But in any event, I was not one of those types that sat down and planned my life out, and that's how it happened. Certainly, I don't think I did any planning at all, actually, to be honest with you.
That makes me feel better. Thank you so much. I'm sure creative writing really helps your persuasive writing skills as well. Now on to Beth-Ann. What was your major in college?
So I was a history education major. So continuing the theme maybe. And I think really what college, that experience taught me was what was my innate calling. And that was learning and guiding teaching, right? And I translated that into internal audit, because as an auditor, I was constantly going into new business areas where I had to learn. But I was also always teaching, because we are the risk and control experts. And part of that is really leading management to a better control framework and teaching them about risk and or what makes an effective control if we don't think their controls are effective. So that innate calling, I would call it, that I learned about myself in college. I went to college to be a lawyer, right? But that just, as I was going through, that just wasn't me. Although some people say I'm a pretty good debater, which might also come in handy as an auditor. And I think that's what the college experience, I think the college experience also broadens you to different perspectives, which is crucial in any sort of job, especially in a global business.
Thank you. And Robin, what did you study in school?
Sure. So I was a political science major with a concentration on international relations, and I minored in French. To complete my French minor, I studied abroad for a semester in the south of France, and that really kind of helped advance my language skills, but also really awoken in me a desire to travel and to want to introduce travel to others. I also went to law school like Masami. Seems like Beth-Ann was a little bit smarter and knew better. She learned early on, because now I'm a recovering attorney. But what law school really taught me was how to think analytically and how to write persuasively. And those are two skills that I use in my everyday life. So definitely a different path to get to where I am now, but no regrets, and everything kind of merged well together to get us right here.
Très bien. Right. Moving on to our next question, you kind of, our panelists touched on this a little bit in your previous answers, but to what extent did you plan for your present career? If you were to ask yourself 10 or 15 years ago what you would be doing professionally, how do you think you would have answered? And we'll start with Masami.
Right. Well, so I already confessed that I did not plan anything very much, or at least not very well. You know, I grew up in Japan. I was born and raised there, and I came here to go to college and have been here since. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is college for me was a very a totally different experience in all ways. I mean, college is hard and different and a new challenge for anybody, but I was adapting to living in a new country and with that. And so I like to think that, you know, it's okay that I didn't really plan. I was adjusting and sort of figuring out what it was that I wanted to do. I didn't even know that I would stay in the United States beyond college. So I didn't plan, but I think as somebody else has already mentioned, those years were very formative in the sense that, well, first of all, I learned a lot about being in this country and, you know, the values and issues that are very important regardless of the path you choose and the field you end up in. And then, you know, even with law school, and I won't get into it because it's such a long story, it's not as if I really had some pivotal experience or a very extended thought process that led me there, to be honest with you. But having said that, as I've already said, I think it all worked out, and I was very fortunate in that way. And so if you asked me, you know, what would I have thought, or what was your question about 10, 15 years ago? Where would I have thought?
Then?
Yeah, okay. Well, so I was still very much in the middle of practicing as a corporate lawyer. And I knew, actually, I did know that that is not where I wanted to be 10 years from then. I knew I wanted to pursue something else. So I don't know if you call that planning, but I did make some deliberate choices and decisions so that I did not sort of limit myself to practicing law. So.
Yeah, it's important to know what you want right, from your future career.
Mhm.
Thank you. Moving on to Lulu, what extent did you plan for your career?
So I didn't plan my career at all either. When I graduated from college, I started as an entry-level engineer at TVA, and knowing at some point I would want to have a graduate degree, but not sure which. So I just worked. Then decided I want to design for a smaller operation. TVA is, at that point, as an entry-level engineer, is just a bit too big for me. And I actually worked through a temp agency for 9 months before I taking on a design engineering position with Ole Mills. I would think the audience here, since college students probably don't remember Ole Mills or know what Ole Mills is. It's a photographic service company that doesn't exist anymore. I ended up at Ole Mills for 13 years. When I left Ole Mills, I was the engineering design documentation manager, but also teaching as an adjunct. Then I decided to jump over to the teaching as adjunct for both UTC and Chattanooga State. My teaching at Chattanooga State introduced me to corporate training projects as well as economic development activities. So 23 years later, I retired from being the executive director of economic and workforce development at the college. So that allowed me to spend decades working with international companies and local companies in the region. Now I'm wearing 3 hats, and one of the hat as executive director of Tennessee China Network, supporting Chinese companies in Tennessee, as well as Tennessee company wanting to do business in China. And the other hat is a Tennessee State lead for men and women mentors, promoting STEM careers with young and not so young women. The third hat is working as workforce development consultant for customers that do not fit in the 2 other buckets. So not planned, just stepping through the doors when it opens, but hopefully with eyes wide open. Thanks.
Thank you. It's very cool. On to Beth-Ann, what extent did you plan for your career?
Well, being a high school history teacher major, not me perfectly well, but so not well. I kind of just fell in. I actually started in internal audit as an administrative assistant as I was waiting for something in the teaching field to come along. And from there, it just kind of took off, where I started to teach myself databases and access, and started to build all the and then became an IT auditor. And from there, it just progressed. And it's funny because when I see the question like 10 to 15 years ago, I could tell you quite honestly, 3 years ago, as we were getting ready to come down to Nashville, I was the chief of staff for internal audit. And I said to my predecessor, I don't want her job. Like, I don't want that job. I don't want to be the chief audit officer. And truth be told, I think part of it was that imposter syndrome. I lacked the confidence to do the job. But her successor, unfortunately, went out on disability. And so I had no choice to become the acting chief audit officer. And there's something amazing about doing the job. You realize you can do the job and you want the job. So I would have told you quite flatly, I do not want to be the chief audit officer of Alliance Bernstein 3 years ago, let alone 10, 15 years ago. So I challenge all of you to challenge yourselves, because I sometimes think we are our biggest roadblock as we progress in our career.
That's really great advice. Thank you so much.
You're
And
welcome.
Robin, what extent did you plan your career?
So this is interesting because really, I think I was 5 when I decided I wanted to be a lawyer when I grew up. So when I was in college, everything I did was to lead to the next step, was to lead to go into law school. Even my job in between undergrad and law school was I worked as a paralegal. So you can imagine my surprise when 4 years into my career, I realized this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I had to kind of figure out what I really wanted to be when I grew up. So when I think back 10 to 15 years ago, I was very much in a transitional place. I decided to leave the firm where I had been practicing. I took a little bit of a sabbatical and actually moved back to France for 6 months to try to kind of get my head straight. And that's when I decided I wanted to enter into international education. And when I first entered the field of international education, it was largely in a sales role, helping to build out partnerships with US universities and a couple of different foreign universities for which I worked. And then in that role, I would often go to conferences, and I would use that time to really network and speak with people who were in the field, but in different roles than what I was doing at the time. And risk management, global risk management, was really becoming more and more of a kind of hot button topic at the time, because there had been several key world events that really directly impacted American students abroad. But you had things like the Arab Spring that were going on. You had the Japan earthquake and the subsequent Fukushima nuclear disaster. And so I was really kind of drawn to those events and their impact. And a niche profession within the field was developing at that time. As universities really were realizing that they had a duty of care to the students that they were sending out in the world to earn academic credit. So I really felt like at that point, my education and all of my previous work experiences were really coming together. I was pretty well poised for a role, doing global risk management within international education. And then it seemed like the stars aligned and I found myself in the right position.
Cool. Thank you so much. Going back to Masami, to our next question, what were some key moments or stepping stones in your life to you being where you are today? What preparation did you undertake to pursue your career?
Well, I think I already alluded to the fact that maybe there was no real pivotal moment, but I can tell you some things that I did no matter what I was doing that helped me get to where I am today. And these are some very, very basic things, like trying to be excellent at whatever opportunity I was in at the moment. Also building relationships. I think that's been a common theme today already. Learning from people, listening to people, just keeping your ears and eyes wide open for different opportunities, and even things like career paths that you may never have heard of, you would never learn about unless you put yourself out there and start talking to people. So, for example, my work with foreign direct investment for the state, I had no idea that this department even existed until I was at an event and I heard my commissioner speaking about the work that our department does. Another way of answering your question is, as I've already mentioned, I was born and raised in a different country, but I have been very fortunate in that I've had the opportunity to come and study in the United States and continue to stay here. And as a result of that, I always knew that I wanted to do something that was cross-cultural and global, use my background and my language capabilities. So, I think rather than one pivotal moment, for me, it was a gradual realization about what it is that I wanted to do. But by the way, I'm still trying to figure out what it is that I want to do when I grow up. So still on that trajectory.
Thank you so much, Masami. And now on to Lulu. What were some key moments or stepping stones?
I will restate, eyes wide open is key. Knowing what's happening around you and to you, seeing a need to leave TVA in order to grow, knowing a smaller design team, I can do more and learn more. So at Ola Mills, I implemented CAD and became a certified AutoCAD user, then a trainer, and that enabled me to do the adjunct teaching. I mentioned mommy track, which is prioritizing my personal need at that time. At the same time, knowing Olin Mills may not survive much longer. There are many examples during my 23 years at the college, but let me address the preparation part. I did finally select a master's degree program after sampling different graduate classes for many, many years. Computer science, MBA, additional engineering classes, and finally decided on a master's degree in engineering management because I was leading an engineering team. I mentioned AutoCAD certification. So I took a lot of continuing classes, project management software, QuickBooks. So just kind of tools you need for the job that you are in or the job you want to take in order to do it well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, as a student here in the College of Business, I'm actively trying to build up my toolbox for potential future career paths. Now, Robin, what were some key moments or stepping stones in your life?
So, as I mentioned, when I left my law firm, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next. And what I ended up doing was really having to take a step back in order to get to where I am now. And so if I had advice for anyone here, it would be, don't be afraid to do that, particularly if you have, I was fortunate to have a network and support system around me, but you can't be afraid to step back to move forward. Sometimes that's necessary. And also, like, during that time, I realized that I really didn't know how to network prior to making a career change. It just wasn't something that, came naturally to me, speaking with strangers at conferences or striking up conversations. But I really can't emphasize enough, just the value in networking, because you never know who you are going to meet and who they may know, or when your paths will cross again. And so when I first started going to those conferences, I would speak with someone and they would pass my name on to someone else, and and so on. So for anyone here, if you have the opportunity, particularly while you're still in university, to practice networking in real life when it's safe to do so, I definitely encourage people to go to campus events, to go to lecture events, alumni events, and talk to people, ask good questions, and really listen to the responses. Always have your elevator pitch ready to go, because I think that all those skills will really come in handy, helping you navigate your professional life and opening up new opportunities for you.
Yeah, networking is such a crucial skill that they really advocate for in the College of Business and UT in general. So thank you. And Beth-Ann, what were some key moments for you?
I mean, I think, sometimes so for example, when I was talking to New York State and I said NYU didn't tell them that I had graduated, right? So I couldn't be eligible for a teacher. At that time, Lehman had just spun off and layoffs were occurring. So I needed to get a job, right? Because teaching wasn't going to pan out for that year. And that's what led me to become an administrative assistant at Barclays. And I had all the technical skill, but let's just say I might not have had the right disposition or desire to be a great administrative assistant. And so I'd actually was going to take another job. I was going to leave Barclays. And they asked me to stay. And I did something you're never supposed to do. I accepted a counter offer where they promised they would teach me computers and programming. And that's what led me into IT auditing. But because I was an administrator, I knew the managing director, he loved me, right? So when I got my first performance evaluation, I'm saying, am I this good, or is he being overly favorable? So I left because I wanted to be judged on my own in a new place. And that's what brought me to Alliance Bernstein. And once I got there's been a bunch of little stepping stones, but I think they all started with the word yes. So Beth-Ann, you want to do a fraud audit? Sure. Beth-Ann, do you want to learn this? Sure. You want to do an operational? We know, but we're really short staffed. Do you want to do an audit here? Sure. So saying yes to those opportunities, that's the first part. but then doing what you need to do to deliver. And all of a sudden you become sort of a go-to person, right? And all of a sudden I went from an IT auditor to an integrated auditor. I was probably one of the only people on the staff to ever look at settlements. That's a business operation, but I looked at it because I said, sure, you need help, why not? So I think there are many, many stepping stones, but for me, once I got to AB, like I said, they all started with the word yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Take those opportunities as they come. That's really great advice as well. Thank you. Moving on to our next question, kind of going off what Robin said about networking. What role have mentors played in your career? Who in your life was instrumental in encouraging you and guiding you forward? And we'll start with Lulu.
Well, I was very fortunate to have many supervisors over my career life, and some of them I learned from. So please note, you can also learn from bad supervisors. Even good supervisors may have area of deficiency. So again, with your eyes wide open, you can learn a lot. I will mention one UTC professor that tapped me to be a TVA intern, which turned into a job after graduation. He also would invite students to attend engineering professional society meetings. So with that, I'm still very active in the engineering community due to his nudge. That also propagated into being involved with Chamber of Commerce events and volunteering and other community organizations. So, so those type of nudges along the way do get you involved and, allow you to step out of maybe your comfort zone and add to your experiences.
Those all sound like really fun events. Thank you. Masami, what role have mentors played in your life?
Very significant ones. I would say that I feel like I've been very blessed, very fortunate in that many people have sort of pulled me up to various positions, opportunities, provided, open doors for me. But I do want to echo what Lulu just said about the ability to learn from anyone. I can only think of maybe just a handful of people I would call mentors, but I feel that, every relationship is a learning opportunity. I mean, I really mean that, and I'm not being overly dramatic or extreme, I believe. I mean, today I'm learning from my fellow panelists, I'm learning from you. And so I think that's really key. And no matter how old you are, where you are in your career, but certainly when you're starting out, there's something to be said about people in certain positions. There's a reason they're there. And sometimes you wonder why they're there, but having said that, and so of course there's a lot to learn.
Wow, that's great advice too. Thank you. Robin, who are some of your mentors?
Sure. Let me first say, I love what Lulu said. You're going to learn from the good supervisors and the bad. There are always going to be people who teach you what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And you have to be open and use all of those as learning experiences. For me, I always go back to my very first boss, the senior attorney who I worked for at my law firm. And this is significant because it's been about 20 years. The reason why, obviously as a mentor, he did great things. He encouraged critical thinking. He always provided helpful feedback. But he presented me with opportunities and taught me the importance of not just having a mentor, but also having a sponsor. And by a sponsor, I mean someone who's willing to mention your name positively in a room when you're not there. Someone who's looking out for opportunities for you in that way. That to me was critical. And that's what that was the role that person served for me. And beyond that, I think they just taught me how to be a good leader because they led by example. And they set the example of how to be the kind of boss, how to be the kind of coworker, even how to be the kind of opposing counsel that someone wants to work with because they respect them and they feel respected when they're working with them. So even now when I try to navigate difficult personalities or manage, my direct reports, I often find myself thinking back to that first person and saying, what would they do in this moment? And so that was very critical for me.
Sounds like a really cool supervisor. Thank you so much. Beth-Ann, who are some of your mentors?
So I think, the chief audit officer who hired me, and I think one of the reasons I really wanted to go to AB was one, at the time, IT audit was male dominated. And here I'm walking in and the audit manager is a woman and the head of the department is a woman. So that kind of led me to there. But I think I'm just going to take a different tact in that relationship, it's always a two-way street.
Mhm.
So the mentor is there to advise and guide, but as a mentee, I had to outline what my desires are, what my interests were, right? So that she could guide and lead me in the right path. And I would go a step further than sponsoring, she was an advocate. So if there was an error that needed analytics, she would say, let Beth-Ann look at it. She's great at data analytics. Let her loose on it and she'll get you the right results. So it's just beyond the sponsorship. It's the advocacy and really speaking up for those people. When new standards came out, I would go to her and I said, well, this is what I think we should do. We need to build this. And she would say, go build it. So I think it's a two-way street. So when you're looking for a mentor, one, you have to be very comfortable with them, you have to be frank with them and honest with them. But you're in charge of your career in terms of the path you want to follow. And I think that's so critical as you're looking for your mentor, because they're not going to have that answer.
You are in charge of your career, of the path you want to follow. Wow, that's the t-shirt I'm taking with me.
It's I always say to my staff, you tell me where you want to go and I'll give you all the tools and the education and the training to get there, make you the contacts, but I can't tell you where you want to be in 5 years. That's something you have to determine.
Yeah, wow, that's really inspiring. Thank you. My next plan question is similar to our audience questions. I'll move on to the next one. Please address the difficulties, if any, women face working in international business. And we'll start with Masami.
Well, I think I don't know that there are any specific to international business, but I can tell you that being a woman in business, a professional woman, has its challenges. Somebody already mentioned mommy track. I did that too for several years. I have 3 children and I still have one at home. And so that is a factor. It's about balancing. But on the other hand, I also count that as a blessing on my good days, because it does give you the, first of all, it teaches you to have to balance various things and multitask, but also it gives you sort of a reprieve from just work, if you will. So I'm grateful for that. There's also other things like, just the fact that there is a panel of women in international business, whereas there isn't a panel of men in international business. I mean, I think that in itself is telling that there is still a difference, and the world still needs to, strive for true equity, gender equality. And we are the subject of that. So whether we like it or not, there is a difference and an imbalance, and the world that we have to navigate in. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Robin, what are your thoughts?
I really think that Masami said it well. I don't know if there are any challenges or difficulty in international business than any other field. The only thing I'll add is what can be interesting is having to navigate cultural differences associated with gender norms when you're working with colleagues or clients or contacts all over the world. So that's the only other thing I can think of to add to that.
Thank you so much. Lulu, do you have anything to add?
Well, I also agree that the difficulties are not just with international businesses. It can be with any kind or any size of business. And it's usually not the company or the organization, but specific people. And sometimes the company or the organization might not be aware of issues or area that needs improvement. So you try to take those type of opportunity to make it a teachable moment. I will share a story from years ago when Olin Mills was working with an Asian company to manufacture a new camera. I was one of the engineers on the design team. And when they visited us, since I'm Chinese, I made tea and served the first day. But immediately I can tell I was treated, they may not know I'm one of the engineer or professional. So I had, realizing that, I had to pivot and ask my boss that I will still make the tea, but I'm going to ask the other men engineers and non-Asian engineer to serve the tea. So teachable moments.
Yeah, and as an Asian American student myself, I've experienced similar, encounters with stereotypes or just images related to that as well. So thank you for sharing that story. Beth-Ann, what do you think?
So here's the good news. It's getting better. It's a better world for your graduating class than it was for mine. However, am I the only woman in a meeting sometimes? Absolutely. And that needs to change. I think I'm going to be a little controversial. I think sometimes women are the biggest challenge that we block ourselves, right? So you hear all the studies. If a man is 50% qualified for a job, he'll go for it. If a woman is 120% qualified for a job, she won't, right? Women, you'll have a seat at the table, but you don't say anything. We're afraid to speak up. We're afraid to sort of give our opinion or be passionate about something. And that creates roadblocks in your own career. So it's great that I'm sitting at the table, but if I say nothing, no one knows what I'm thinking. No one can judge me on my business acumen. So I think sometimes we ourselves are our biggest difficulty in navigating a career. Right? And how do you bring your true self? How do you bring your confidence in your ability? Well, and accepting that so you can push yourself forward. It's an uncomfortable position for women. And we just did a survey globally, and it was a global questionnaire, but in my department, it says, I feel free to speak my mind. I'm always happy to give my opinion. The women in my department scored 10 points less than the men. And even the women in more senior positions scored lower. There's still this uncomfortability to speak your mind and give your opinion. So I think, I don't know what we do, but I think as women, women leaders, it's important to continuously mentor, coach, and encourage our women employees to speak out. And as you guys get into that workspace, go to Toastmasters, just do whatever you need to do to get comfortable with publicly speaking and grow your confidence in yourselves so that you apply for the job that maybe, okay, you're 90%, or let's not go for 110 or maybe not 50 like men, but that you're 80% qualified for, right? Like, challenge yourself, push yourselves.
Wow. And again, really inspirational. Show up and show out, women. I love it.
Your generation needs to change it, Lucy.
We do, us Gen Z folk. Yeah. And thank you yet again. Our next question, kind of Masami, similar to your mommy track you talked about, but how do you balance your work obligations with your personal lives? Masami, I'll start with you again.
Yeah, I think you just have to be aware of the, different, how do you say, challenges. And you just, like, for example, especially during the pandemic, and most of us were working from home a lot, it's very difficult to separate personal and work, and it's tough. And then, just like a lot of my co-panelists here, I work across so many time zones. And if I'm not careful, I'm starting at literally, 6 a.m. and then going till 9, 10 p.m. And, sometimes we just have to do it because that's just part of our job. But just making yourself, say, well, today I am going to shut it down. Or if I'm taking a day off, that's really a day off. I'm not going to be checking my phone every hour because that's not really a day off. So just telling yourself to make sure that that balance is right for me.
That's really great advice again. My phone is a little bit too attached to me sometimes, so I can definitely relate to that. Lulu, what do you think? How do you navigate all of your responsibilities?
Well, when you enjoy your work and it's responsible for people and work downstream, it is hard to, cut off the tie sometimes. But, family obligation kind of needs to keep us aware of other things as well as self-care. So actually, calendar is my friend. I even schedule self-care time so that there's some balance. And so that's how I manage that.
I will definitely start adding that to my calendar. Thank you. Beth-Ann, how do you balance everything?
Well, I might be a little controversial here, but I think that work-life balance is kind of a myth. It's a myth. I'm going to be frank with you. There are some times where work comes first, and it has to come first. I have a deadline, I have a priority, I have an obligation that comes to first. Then there's sometimes, work is going to be there, but I have to be there for my family, and that's going to come first. So it is not so much work-life balance, but flexibility and knowing when those scales go like this and this and this. So it's that fluidity. So there's sometimes I'm your best friend, and there's sometimes I'm not a very good friend because I have to work. Sometimes I'm a great wife, and sometimes, maybe not because I have something. And then there are times I'll do my self-care. I'll say, okay, I'm done with the work. I'm not going to look at my emails for an hour. It's hard, but I try. And so it's just that sort of flexibility of how you weave into those things, knowing what is important in each one of those aspects and prioritizing the time to make sure those things are done.
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up question, Beth-Ann, from that though. Sometimes even as a student, I find myself with my personal life and school responsibilities where two equally important things will come into conflict, and it's not like a clear one's more important than the other. So when you're put in those situations, how do you then figure out which to prioritize?
Personally, for me, if there's a deadline at work, it has to be work. And I love you. For my staff, I say their family comes first and the work can wait. So it depends, I think, as a boss, your family is number one, right? They're not going to write 20 years after I'm gone. It's not like someone at AB is going to be like, oh, she was great, right? When I'm done and dusted, it is your family and your friends. That is who you will live on in, right? So there's that always should be. So for my employees, your family comes first. That has to be the priority. If you're juggling and one, for me personally, if I have a deadline, that deadline comes first. So if I can put my family and still meet the deadline, the family will jump ahead of that. And that's kind of how I make the decision. But if the deadline is an hour and my niece needs something, sweetie, give me an hour.
Mm. Yeah, so I imagine there's some grace and forgiveness in this as well. But yeah, thank you so much. Robin, what about you?
So this is a tricky one because I don't know if I've quite got it balanced just yet. For me, because my job really requires being available 24/7, 365 for emergencies. In like you've heard some of the other panelists say, what I'm working with staff that could be in Asia or Europe or the Pacific. So all times of the day or night, it's very complicated because I don't have a 9 to 5. So for me, I've found that transparency with my team and setting boundaries has really helped. To be honest, I think when you first start out in your career, and particularly if you're in a new job, you're going to work probably more than you would like. There probably won't be that balance in the beginning because you're going to be learning on the go and really creating a reputation for yourself. And then once you kind of establish yourself, you start to realize you get a little bit more autonomy, right, over your day and in your life. But there are always going to be days and sometimes even weeks, depending on what's going on, where just these very, very intense periods, and that's it. I hear Beth-Ann say, I'm not a good daughter, I'm not a good wife, I'm not a good anything. But it's really important for me when those periods end to be able to reclaim some time for myself to recover, because I can only be good if I'm serving from a full cup. For me, when you kind of find an environment, it doesn't allow for you to reclaim that time. You have to ask if that's the right environment for you, if it's the right environment for the long run. And when I talk about transparency, I'll say that my personal life is quite different. My husband is French, and we split our time between the US and France. And so at every stage of my career, when I was offered a new position, I was always very clear about where I was with my personal life and how I need to carve out that time. And I found that being transparent like that allowed people to make the accommodations for me to be able to kind of have a personal life that I needed and that I wanted to go along with my professional life.
Yeah, as Beth-Ann said, you have to speak up. Let people know your priorities. Thank you so much for all of our panelists again. We're now going to transition to individual questions for our panelists. So starting with a question for Masami. In your job, how do you identify companies from around the world that would benefit from doing business in Tennessee? While helping these international companies connect with local talent, what important traits are they looking for in new hires?
Okay, so that's two different questions, right? So the first is, as I said, we try to identify, as you said, companies from all over the world who might want to set up operations here in Tennessee. The first way we do that is, as I've already mentioned, also by these teams that foreign offices in various countries, they collectively directly recruit in about 20 countries. But you're saying it's a two-way relationship. So it's not as if we go knocking on companies' doors. They usually say, hey, we're interested. Can you tell us more about Tennessee? Because we might want to consider you as a potential location. So that's one way we do it. We also work with different agencies and offices, consultants, various we call them stakeholders or multipliers, different outside organizations that might come into contact with such companies, global companies that may say to them, hey, we're thinking about investing in the United States, but we don't know how to do it. And then those third parties might contact us. So there's various ways in which that happens. But the important thing is the company really is the one that initiates that first step. And as for the types of workers that companies are looking at, it really depends on the industry and the company and the job title and description. But one thing I can say is, well, since this is an international business panel, let me just add a little, a short story about how one thing that we are always trying to learn from these companies on is, depending on where these companies come from, their expectation of what a good worker might be is very, very different. And sometimes we're talking the same language, that is, we're using the same words, but a high quality worker in Germany, the standards might be really, really high compared to what some other, country might think is an acceptable or good worker. So.
Yeah, I think that goes back to your earlier comment on cross-cultural competence too, and understanding the different requirements. Thank you so much. And the next question is for Lulu. Lulu, how do you navigate through cultural and economic differences between Tennessee and China? What challenges do you face building bridges in this difficult arena?
Let me answer the second part first. I guess I'm just super lucky to start leading the Tennessee China Network on March 15, 2020. The sentiments toward China, I will say, was not super positive at that point, and still navigating to some challenges. But what I try to explain, first of all, so I lived all over Asia before my family immigrated to US and landed in Tennessee. So I lived in Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, and other Asian countries. But so I do understand a lot of the international dynamics. So I have personal views on a lot of things, but I have to make sure that what we're trying to do is do business. I have to keep repeating that Tennessee China Network's focus is supporting economic growth of Tennessee. We're trying to bring forth resources to help existing businesses. We're currently, Tennessee is not actively recruiting new businesses from China. So back to the first question, we navigate differences by understanding what the needs are. What do our members and partners want to or need to accomplish? Then we connect them with people and company with the experts. Usually the task or project will then smooth out the differences.
Yeah, I'm sure your experience living in so many different Asian cultures was super helpful in your current position too, as you mentioned, and understanding those relationships.
Yeah, it's helpful, but I actually had to do some additional homework because for years I did not connect with that part of my background for some time, since with universities I was not in the international realm except working with companies.
Right. Thank you so much for your insight. Moving on to Beth-Ann, my question for you is, what is your experience navigating cultural and economic differences in AB's global business? What skills are necessary to deal with challenges in transformation in global business?
Sure. So it's funny because, you would think cultural differences would be country to country. And as we found out, navigating, relocating from New York to Nashville, it can be within the United States. And, New Yorkers are a little more kind of, just bottom line it for me. What are you trying to say? Like, let's keep the train moving, right? Land the plane and let's move on. And so when we always do these brainstorming meetings or peer review meetings where we discuss an audit or an audit report, and they could get really contentious. I mean, previously they were really contentious. People got really aggressive. And when I became chief audit officer, I really didn't like that whole vibe. So we really try to make them more informational and sort of challenging. Like, I have to play devil's advocate. If you can't convince me that your issue is an issue, I'm not letting you out to the business. But we thought our tone and tenor, and no one was mean, was so much improved. So all the New Yorkers are high-fiving themselves, patting themselves on the back. What a great job. We've totally uplifted the tone and tenor of those meetings. How to come to find out that the Nashville staff thought we were kind of mean, right? And that we were shutting down conversation because we were kind of bottom lining. Okay, yeah, I get it. Just let's keep moving, right? So there's cultural differences within this country. And I think it is being open to that constructive criticism, right? If you're managing it. As far as international travel or anything like that, I just always try to be me, because if you're not, it's an ill-fitted suit. But be respectful of the culture of the country in which I was traveling. So I tried to learn about it. I would talk to my staff there, any do's and don'ts. You know, you don't want to offend anybody. So being mindful that every country might, not every country, but certain countries have maybe different cultural norms, and that you just be open that the way that you do something in this country is not the way some is not expected or accepted in a different country. In terms of skills to deal with the challenges, I mean, I think whether it's transformation or just regular old business, I think the ability to actively listen, making sure you are reacting to what is said and not what you're making up, not what you interpreted what was said, like keep it to the facts. Building relationships, knowing the people, getting to know those people. Intellectual curiosity. How curious are you about the world outside of your department? And then I think, you know, communication. And how effective can you deliver and communicate your message? And then lastly, I'm going to add one more, and adaptability.
Yeah, relationship building seems to be the theme, the tagline of our panel.
It's an important one.
Yeah, and adaptability as well. And I thought it was interesting, kind of tying back to Masami's point. You mentioned, Beth-Ann, about you know, like being aware of those cultural differences and respecting them and listening actively. And you may be saying words, as Masami said, but you might be saying completely different things. So just being aware of the conversation is so vital. Thank you. Robin, my question for you. In your position at WorldStrides, what measures should the audience take when we travel abroad to stay safe and healthy? Who can we contact if we find ourselves in a crisis in a foreign location?
Those are great questions. So I'm going to start, with some of the obvious rules that you would follow even while you're on campus or in your home community, like using the buddy system after dark, don't drink to excess when you're traveling, and definitely don't take a drink from a stranger. Always make sure you're using a registered taxi, or if you're using ride shares when you're abroad, always make sure that the car details match what is in your app. I've managed incidents when people got in the wrong car. Those are just like general rules where you should follow anywhere. But when it comes to traveling, I would say research where you're traveling. Risk is personal to the traveler. And what I mean by that is that our identities beyond gender can expose us to different risk. So everyone on this panel may experience street harassment when they travel, as a woman traveler. Is whether a parent or not could expose us to different risk. So, whether that's religion or race or sexual identity, those could all be treated differently in the different countries and different places where you're going. So it's really important to understand if where you're traveling to is what I would say friendly to those identities. And that's not to say that you can't travel somewhere that isn't necessarily friendly, but when you understand the risk or what makes you more vulnerable, you can then prepare for that. So the U.S. Department of State is one place that keeps country profiles, and they will address special considerations, whether it's accessibility or anything else for individual travelers to help inform themselves. Definitely want to understand local norms, particularly as they relate to dress, and be respectful of the culture that you're going to, you don't want to stand out for the wrong reasons. Then always have a working cell phone. And this is the thing I tell everyone, always be accountable to someone. It could be, your parents, a significant other, your best friend, your neighbor, but just as long as it's someone who you trust, always make sure someone knows where you're going, where you're staying, and has a copy of your itinerary. So when there is an incident abroad, someone knows how they can reach you. If you have a plan to check in with that person, make sure you commit to it. I still do those things to this day. Believe it or not, I'm an old married woman, and my mom will still ask me for my flight details and the hotel where I'm staying, whether I'm traveling for work or from pleasure. And, I share those details with her so she knows where I am and what to do if something happens. And then finally, I'll say, trust your instincts. No matter where you are in the world, if something feels off, it probably is, and know when to walk away. Just believe in yourself and your instincts. And for your second question, in terms of who you call, always know the local equivalent of 911 in the country where you're going. 911 is not universal, will not work everywhere. So you want to know that. And then of course you have the US Embassy or the embassy of, wherever your citizenship is, your country of citizenship, that are always there and have emergency services for their citizens when they're traveling.
Thank you so much. I did have a quick follow-up question based on your comments, Robin. You talked about knowing that risk is personal and depends on your identity. How does intersectionality influence the risk a person could face?
Absolutely, right? It's a good question. When I travel in the world, I don't just travel as a woman. I identify as African-American. I travel as an African-American woman. And in some places, that could mean that I may be over-sexualized than other travelers, right? That, don't have those same identities. I could face racial discrimination, racial profiling in places, right? And maybe another female traveler would not face. So I really think that any kind of risk assessment that doesn't take into account the various identities and the intersection of identities for the traveler is an incomplete risk assessment.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just want to remind our audience members to please, if you have any questions, use the Q&A box on your Zoom screen as we're wrapping up here in the last 20 minutes of our conversation. My next question, starting with Lulu, what aspects of international business will change the most in the next decade?
Well, I see a lot of change coming forth on supply chain issues, and of course, talents and workforce, especially in international business, the skills that's needed. Technology is everywhere. The remote working is affecting international business as well. And working 24/7 for some of the people here. Those are the type of things that people are having to get used to if you're going to work globally.
That's right. The world is always awake somewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Masami, what do you think aspects of international business will change in the next 10 years?
I think Lulu covered pretty much all of it, but I guess I will add that I am sure there are some things that we don't even know about today as we're talking together. I mean, this has been repeated over and over already, but the pandemic, I mean, who would have thought that this was what we would be facing right now and over the last couple of years already? So I hope that, though, that experience means that we will be prepared for whatever changes we are going to see in the next little bit. But otherwise, I think all those things Lulu mentioned. And hopefully also another thing I'd like to see more of is sort of, more cooperation between countries, not just lip service, but in the true aspect of the word, because of these crises that we never know we would be facing in the near future again, such as another pandemic, hopefully not, but in any event. I hope that this has taught us a lesson that we just need to be better prepared, individually as countries and the world in general, and more cooperation so that we will be better prepared.
Yeah, going back to relationship building and the value of diplomacy is so critical for collaboration. Thanks, Masami. Beth-Ann, what do you think will change, in particularly maybe in auditing?
Well, I think data analytics is becoming more and more crucial. So that having that technical skill, but I think I was really thinking more broadly in terms of, if you're looking at like areas of risk or things that we're constantly challenged by, obviously cybersecurity, ransomware, and all of that. I mean, God knows what the next attack will be, what the next technology will be that can blow up a business. So how a business is really preparing for what's next, because we're very reactive and not proactive. Then ESG, right? ESG, it's all over the place. Europe is so far ahead of us, but where Europe goes, the rest of the countries tend to go. So what is the global regulatory regimes going to be like? Because they seem to be coming more and more and not less and less, right? Unfortunately, because it's just more audit works. I guess I should be grateful. And then, I think Zoom taught us a lot also about our customer bases. So people of my generation were eager to meet with their advisors, let's say face to face. People of your generation, totally cool on Zoom. Yeah, it's totally, they please don't make me come into the office, right? So I think it's the changes that the business will have to make to meet the demands of the next set of clients. And that is improving this sort of technology, making these experiences more better, right? Zoom is good, it's coming a long way, but what's the next generation of this? How much information can we safely provide to you so you never have to talk to your advisor if you never want to? Right? Because just give me the information. So I think it's how are you going to be responsive to that next generation? Because each generation pushes you further along. Corporate responsibility or corporate stewardship. When is the appropriate time to be involved in social justice? When is the appropriate time? How are we holding ourselves responsible beyond our investments and products we push, but ourselves in the ESG aspects? And that demand, and again, that's coming from younger and younger generations. My parents, they're not really concerned about it, right? So I think it's how the changes I can't predict. I know where they're going to come from.
Well, it makes me happy you think data analytics is crucial, as that is what I'm studying at the university here.
Data analytics, and I'll tell you a lot in our business, more and more data analysts, digital transformation, all of that, artificial intelligence, that is becoming more and more crucial in our business. And we're pushing that further and further along. So well, good major.
So keep a lookout, AB. Self-promo. Thank you so much, Beth-Ann. Now, Robin, what do you think? What aspects of international business will change?
I think you had a lot of great answers from my co-panelist. Just coming from a risk perspective, prior to COVID, pandemic was just one of those words in like your list of potential risks that were out there. It was a word that was somewhere in your insurance clause, but you never really paid attention to it, right? And so now it's really a matter of being prepared for not if there will be another pandemic, but when there is another pandemic, when there is another outbreak. Prior to the pandemic, I mean, I was managing our participants, our students who were in Australia during the wildfires, and we're seeing the impact of climate change and how that impacts natural disasters, right? And making sure that we're prepared to respond to those types of things, and that we have the right policies in place to protect our employees, our and our properties and all of our assets abroad. So in my area, for the risk management area, that's where we're kind of.
Yeah, the world only is getting more risky. Thank you so much. So that's the end of my pre-written questions. And now we're going to move to our audience questions. So this first question, what would be the best advice for someone who is currently in the process of applying or finding jobs? How would you go about this process if you were experiencing it today? We can start with Lulu.
Well, one of the things that I do a lot of talent recruitment for companies, and I try to make sure the college students that are applying to those jobs, making sure that their resume is matching what their skills are, but also read the job description. You might have to customize or update it a little bit because sometimes there's not an alignment. And so that's one thing that I've been pretty critical of when I recruit at colleges. Also, making sure they're presenting themselves as a whole self. You know, there's different parts of you, whether you volunteer, your own social activities could present to the employer what type of person you might be, because you get that one chance to present your resume, and that could mean that you get an interview or not. So resume is key.
Yeah, you only have a first impression once. I had
Yeah.
the coach tell me. Thank you. Masami, do you have any advice?
I agree with everything Lulu just said, but I would like to add, and this is along the same lines, but don't have any typos in your cover letter, resume. I have seen everything from, when I was in a position where I was looking at resumes and I was working for a company, a candidate had the wrong company name. I mean, I know everybody recycles letters and all that good stuff, but for goodness sakes, take just a few minutes to make sure you're not doing that. Also be punctual. If you get an interview, if you're lucky enough to get an interview, learn a little bit about the company before coming to the interview, and have good questions. You're also interviewing the company, so you need to be able to, and that is part of the interview process from the company's perspective, right? I mean, have you done your homework? Do you know enough about this company so that you have questions to ask? So I would say absolutely make sure you do those things. And then finally, not just in the job search process, but in any situation, whether you're looking for a job or starting a new job, it's an internship, a permanent position, be nice and be kind. That goes a long way. And I have to say, maybe even more important than some of your skill sets, other skill sets. So, don't be fake about it, but keep that in mind. Be nice and be kind.
Thank you. Yeah, kindness is so crucial. Robin, do you have any advice?
Sure, and it's kind of been my theme throughout, but I'm going to mention again the networking aspect of it, particularly today when it feels like you're applying for jobs and it feels like you're kind of submitting everything into the black hole that is the job application portal. So speaking with people, trying to see if you know someone who works in the company who can talk to you about the company. I have friends and colleagues who they got their resumes in the hands of 5 different people at an organization in order to make sure that they were able to get that interview. Be patient with it. It's important to, as Masami said, make sure there are no typos like that in your resume, but also be concise. A lot of people, a lot of job searchers are not, a lot of the people who are hiring will have time to read every word in your resume. So you want to make sure that what you have written is going to have their attention and is going to really get across distinctly who you are and what value you add to the organization.
Thank you. Beth-Ann?
Sure. So beyond what was already said, I have a couple of tips. Be able to speak to your resume. Nothing will make you lose a job faster if I ask you something specific on your resume and you don't know what I'm talking about. So make sure you know what your resume says and make sure you can speak to it, because a lot of companies, you are asked specific questions off of what we see on your resume. That's what brought you into the door. So that's why we're curious about it. Answer the question and provide examples. Don't just say you're a team player. Why? Why are you a great team player? Even if you don't have work experience, go back to college, right? So maybe you were on a project and someone got sick and you stepped up and you took over that portion for that person because it was the team that had to submit the project, and that's where you stepped up. Why are you great at project management? Because while you were in college. So don't worry that you don't have any job experience, because the experiences that you have in college will prepare you for that job, right? If you're a student and you're taking a lot of course loads, project management, you're doing it left and right. So use specific examples and then actively listen. Answer the question that is asked. So if I ask you, so tell me why you think you're qualified for this position, that's the question I want to know. I want to know, in your opinion. Well, as you can see from my resume, I've done this job before. No, that's not what I'm asking. In your opinion, Lucy, in your opinion, why do you think? Why did you apply for this job? And then I cannot underscore, do research. Like, there is so much information out there. Go to the company's website. Make sure you understand the job responsibilities and make sure you understand the company that you're walking into. Because there's really, in this day and age, there's really no excuse not to know what Alliance Bernstein is, for example, like we're an asset manager, right? Or there's so much information. So do your homework.
Yeah, great advice. Actually, the next audience question is directed to Beth-Ann. What do you look for as terms of qualities during the hiring process for your team? And does knowing more than one language help within that process for determining a candidate?
It doesn't hurt. Okay, so it was interesting. So when we relocated from New York to Nashville, I had two choices. I had to make two choices. Either I could hire someone with audit experience, but they had no asset management, or I could hire someone with asset management experience, but had no auditing experience. And in that, you target in on what key skills do we think will make you, right? So I am convinced if you have the desire, I can make you an auditor, right? I'm convinced, because 98% of the time we've been able to do it. Are you intellectually curious? That's why learn about the company. Again, come prepared with some questions, right? And sometimes those questions can be reactionary. If I tell you I've been with the company 23 years, a layup question for y'all is, what has kept you at this company for so long? That's a layup. I just gave you one, right? If the person talks about their experience, ask a question. If you don't have one and you're trying to think of one, ask them about themselves. But anyways, are you intellectually curious? Are you an effective communicator? Do you have good analytical skills? Don't tell me you have good analytical skills. Prove it to me. Tell me why. Are you detailed oriented? So those are skills that not only will make you an effective auditor, I think they will just make you an effective employee. What are your time management or project management skills? I like to call them project management skills because time management, I think all our time managements can be up here, but if you can deliver your projects, that's really what I'm concerned about.
Well, thank you so much. Well, we're close to wrapping up here, so I'll first open up for our panelists if anyone has any closing remarks they would like to share. If not, then I'm happy to take the reins for us. Thank you all so much for attending tonight. We have some exciting events coming up at UT, including the International Education Week, featuring multiple events happening all across the campus. This year's theme is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We talked about climate change and the importance of ESG tonight. I'm posting a link in the chat, if it'll please load. Yep, there it is. Posting this in the chat, which takes you to more information about the events we'll be having. The keynote speaker this year will be Hera Brown, a UT graduate, Fulbright scholar, as well as the first transgender Rhodes Scholar. She is returning to campus and will speak about her work related to refugee studies and supports Scholar Rescue Fund. And we hope you can join us. Again, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I know I've really learned so much from our panelists and really appreciate their time and insight. But thank you on behalf of the Tennessee World Affairs Council and University of Tennessee.